Good afternoon, folks. Right, we're on the home stretch. Just to remind you, if you've been using your electronic devices across lunchtime, if you could set them to silent, please. If it goes off, you have to stand up and do a little dance. It's very embarrassing. We have three speakers at the end of all the presentations, etc. There'll be a chance to ask some questions again. And our first speaker is Marnie McCormack, MD, Software Engineering, JP Morgan and Chase. And her presentation is basically about how to be a better leader. So, Marnie, for a start, please.
So hello, it's really lovely to see you all, and I'm delighted to be back in Dynamic Earth. I was saying earlier, we used to come here a lot when my children were small, so now I feel about 1 million years old. My name is Marnie McCormack. I'm a managing director at JP Morgan Chase, and I'm a software engineer, really. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time with you today talking about leadership and decision making. I did a scientific calculation before I came here of how many decisions I've made in my career. I might tell you at the end how many of them I think might have been good decisions, but I think it's about 5,800 decisions over, 29 years in software. Probably about 100 of those were what you would class as really big decisions. But not all the important decisions that you make as a leader will seem important at the time. Arguably, making decisions is hard, but knowing if you were right is actually much harder. So when you think about how are you leading and what does your leadership bring to your organisation, you do need to be thoughtful about how are you judging your own success. I went to conference school, so I carry around a crushing sense of failure, which is pretty much why I've been successful, because I'm always trying harder. So I think, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the types of decisions that you will make in your career, and I guess what I've learned from 30 years of probably making mistakes. The one thing I will lead with, because it's been the most important lesson of my entire career, is that being completely right is a lot less important than you think it is, okay? So when I was younger and really thought I was super clever, and the older I get, the less clever I think I am, I really thought that being right was the only thing that mattered, and it got me in a lot of trouble because actually people don't want to hear that you think you're right all the time, turns out. Making in leadership decisions is about making the best decision for the circumstances that you are in with the data that you have to achieve a specific goal, right? And that's super important. Understanding the constraints in which you operate is really important to making good decisions. Most of what I've learned this far in my life and in leadership is from making mistakes, listening to advice, and I've had a lot of really great advice, reading books and watching movies. I'm going to try today to thread it all together to give you what I think might be the best advice I could offer. So a bit of audience interaction on my slides. Who knows what movie this is? Shout out. Thank you. This is good. I look out and I realise there's a lot of people who've watched the same films as me in the room, which is a relief, right? So binary decisions are a type that you will probably have to make fairly often. In The Matrix, Neo had to choose between the truth and contented ignorance, right? Actually, sometimes you have to choose between those two options at work. I hope you're making those decisions intentionally. Not all binary choices are as well bounded as that. However, if you need to make a straight decision between two choices, the most important thing is that you're super clear about the outcome you were trying to achieve and the constraints that you have, and really importantly, and I offer this openly, being pessimistic, okay, is one of the most useful things you can be as a senior leader. Technologists are lovely human beings and they are all wildly optimistic, and you will go to hell in a handbasket if you're not a bit pessimistic when you make decisions, okay? I thought I'd illustrate with an example from my own career. I worked on a very difficult project delivery in China. It had a very demanding date. It had a very complicated technical spec. I think it's probably most technology deliveries in China do. And an absolute ton of constraints, regulation, infrastructure, supply chain. I mean, it was really difficult. And when I came into it, there was one path to walk. I kind of get brought in to try and save us, right? Marnie, we need you to go over here and try and save us, right? And it was really apparent to me fairly early that there were two choices available. The first one was to deploy a fully automated microservice architecture that would be operationally scalable, that would meet all our operational requirements for automation, but it would take a bit longer to build. And the other choice, which was not seen as a choice when I got there, was to deliver a more manual solution that would have a ton of operational friction, but would get delivered a lot earlier. And the second of those choices is a really hard sell, right? A really hard sell, and not one I've often made in my career as a software engineer. But it was 100% the right thing to propose, because if I'd gone for the first path, you know, the overwhelming requirement is to hit the date, right? We're going to be inspected on a date for this deliverable. It's super important. The scale of the business is really large in China, right? But the opportunity cost of trying to do the right thing was so big that it would substantially delay 2 critical projects in North America, right? And really no one was thinking about that, because everyone was thinking about how are we going to get China done. And it was my job to go to my bosses and say, we could do this, but I'm recommending that we don't, because if we do, we'll pull all the engineering resource off these 2 other critical projects. They will run very late, and you won't get the outcome that you want for the business at the end of the year, okay? So in binary decisions, I would suggest that the best way to do it is a really well-written list of pros and cons, right? And that's what I did. Here's option 1, here's option 2. Here's why I am recommending option 2, like really simple stuff. I would say to you that there's a few books I've read I'm going to reference. Eben Hewitt's book, it's an O'Reilly book, it's called Technology Strategy Patterns. It's an amazing book, really recommend it. Quotes Machiavelli for this. Prudence consists in recognizing the different dangers and accepting the least bad as good. And I'm not a big fan of Machiavelli, but be clear about in binary decision making, you know, people can kind of be looking at like the great attractive solution and the bad kludgy solution. But that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to deliver an outcome, be clear-sighted about how best to get there. Okay. Also, again, you'll note my pessimism. I was like, we could do this great sexy thing, or we could be months and months late and also derail all these other things we're trying to do because this is really hard and I'm not sure we understand it all. Okay. I put in here, if you choose the best option contingent on something happening in the future, be super clear about the size of that danger. Okay. So my next one is lots of options. Who knows this one? Good Place, right? So in this, too many Janets was the problem. For people who haven't watched The Good Place, it's great, you should watch it. Choosing Janets is probably easier than making decisions when you have lots of options. In my day job, I head up all the observability solutions for JP Morgan. There are a ton of solutions for observability in the market. Not all choices are very well bounded, right? One of the things I would say is you need to be able to narrow the field quickly. SWOT is super good for this. Be thoughtful about your organizational environment when you make decisions and you have lots of choices. Making change in a big organization is actually really hard, right? So be thoughtful about, you might make a decision, or you may have made a decision, and now there might be lots of other options on the table, and everyone's saying, Marnie, why don't you do this other thing? It's so much better. And you're like, yeah, but the organizational tax of trying to pivot at scale is really hard. And remember, in fast-moving markets, your decisions are never going to age well. You should be upfront about that, but you should be thoughtful about what are the conditions that would make you pivot. And I really like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for this. There is one caveat to making those decisions, and that's confirmation bias. Be really thoughtful when if you are completing a SWOT analysis for something that you have a vested interest in. You really need to try to be super honest with yourself about opportunities, threats, and weaknesses for the thing that you like, okay? And you all like something. Everybody likes the thing they own. They like the people that work for them. They feel emotionally attached. It's a really good opportunity to engage other people. So if you need to make decisions with a stakeholder or with your team, then actually allowing them to be involved in SWOT is one really good way to make transparent decisions. Being transparent can make unpopular decisions more palatable to the people who care about them, okay? Because they can see that you're genuinely trying to make a decision based on fact and data. So be thoughtful about that. The one other thing I would say is, in a hectic market or a fast-paced landscape, it's really important to recognize that your decisions may not survive contact with the enemy. You have to be willing to change your mind, okay? Be thoughtful about that. You can't change it all the time while you're looking decisive. But I think in these situations, recognizing that you might need to pivot and socializing that is a good thing to do, okay? I think being open, actually, in these situations is very good. So, who knows this one? Indiana Jones, right? So decisions made under pressure is a category all of its own. Like Indiana and his dad in The Last Crusade, being thrown together in a crisis with a new partner to solve a problem or save a failure is something that you probably all have to do at some point in your career. It is the single best opportunity to progress in your career that you will ever have. Okay, so being really clear-sighted, never waste a good crisis. These situations usually need more than one answer. You usually need a right now answer. What's your sticking plaster for the terrible crisis that you're in? What are you going to do next to stop the sticking plaster falling off, right? And then finally, what's the strategic fix? Usually people lose interest after you get to the what next because there's something else on fire that they're looking at now. So you get more time for that. So being really thoughtful about that's important. Relationships are the crucial part of making decisions in a crisis. You're going to be thrown together with people, and the only thing that actually matters, doesn't actually matter if you're right or wrong, well, it matters a bit. Mostly what matters is trust. Be open, be honest, and always tell the bad news when you're in these crisis situations. The one thing I will say from my own career, these are the situations where being able to think outside the box or having someone in your team who can think outside the box is super useful. Because when you get tired, and those of you who might be in tech might have enjoyed Christmas with Log4j as I did a while back, right? When you are in pressure situations and people get tired, they can continue walking down a failing path. It's really important that you regularly take a step back and look at whether the decision that you made is still a good one, or actually whether you need to maybe have a plan B and a plan C, and maybe you need to do them both, okay? So being able to wipe the slate clean and actually look at the problem from a new lens is really important. And if you feel you can't do it because you're too close to it, get someone else who can do it for you, okay? So this one, who knows this one? It's popular, right? With this audience, Star Wars, right? So not all decisions age well is what I'm using Anakin and Padme to illustrate, okay? I've put on here that Padme had no way of knowing that Anakin would go to the dark side, but I think when he killed the younglings, that was probably a signal. Knowing when to quit is a really important decision-making skill, okay? In big organizations, people can be really reluctant to admit failure. It can be seen as like really not good for your career, which is probably true. As you become more senior, knowing when to pull the plug becomes more and more important, okay? I'll use that an illustration from my own career. I took a new job. I tend to change roles every couple of years. I either get offered a new opportunity inside JP Morgan, or I move to do something else that I find interesting. And I moved into a new space, and there was a great leader and a great team, and they had a new, really modern product that was fully automated, that was going to do amazing things. And I was quite excited, and it was the least on fire thing in my portfolio, right? So I'm busy throwing water over all the problems that I've just inherited, and this thing was all good. So I was like, that's fine. They know what they're doing. They've got a senior person. It's all good. But everywhere I went, I kept hearing these whispers of when that thing is ready, or if that thing gets to production. I'm like, it's been in production for 6 months. Why does everyone think this thing is not ready? And I finally sent a note to the team and said, can you do me a favor? Can you just pull your user data and give me an idea of how many people are logging on every week, how many, it was infrastructure optimizer tool, how many optimizations they execute in a week, how many succeed, how many fail, just to give me a feel. And the answer was 3 users a week, right? And there's 60,000 technologists in JP Morgan. I'm going to guess that 2 of those users were probably in my team. I might have been one of them. How many changes they made a week? Like 6. How many of them failed? 5. I was like, wow. Like, now I know why everyone, and there were 13 engineers on this project, right? So it's very expensive how to do nothing thing, right? And it was an absolutely brilliant eureka moment for me in my career about the power of data when you have signals and symptoms of a thing that's not going very well, or people really don't like it, or they're failing to deliver, or smoke is coming out of your thing. Really be thoughtful about what are the measurements for success and what data do you have, and if you don't have any, go get some, okay? And so I pulled the plug on that, and it was like unpopular, and I had to be really thoughtful about in these. Remember that at work, it's important that there aren't a lot of losers, right? So if you are reversing someone else's decision, then being thoughtful about how to market that is really important, because they won't thank you for me saying, oh, I came along, this thing's a huge mess, right? I'm going to kill it. I'm here to save you, right? It's not a good look among senior people, and you need goodwill. So again, use data, be transparent. Really importantly, the lens that you want to have in that is not, look at this amazing thing that I killed, but look at what I'm doing instead with the investment that we've got, or what I can do for the business with the developers that I've just freed up from this project, right? And signalling, there's a great book called Ends. I have a total blank. I'll post on LinkedIn my references, and it's about how, you know, how to give a nice end to projects, right? So be thoughtful about that. But honesty is important when you're reversing people's decisions. I put on here a quote from my mother, who would love that I'm quoting her. And she used to say, remember, Marnie, nobody likes a know-it-all. Right. So don't critique from on high when you're reversing other people's decisions that did not age well. So this is my favourite TV show ever. Who knows what this is? Silicon Valley, right? I love Silicon Valley. I want to be Guilfoyle when I grow up. I don't think that's going to happen for me, but I'm all right with it. I've come to terms with it. You are never solving all problems. You are just preferring some problems over others when you make decisions. Gregor Hopf's book, The Architect's Elevator, is a wonderful book. And he points that out, right? As in Silicon Valley, in this example, you can see the room's on fire. They weren't caring about the fire because what they were trying to do was keep their video live stream up. And so they were really happy as the house literally burned around them, okay? Kind of an extreme example. This is more common in smaller decisions. So an example from my own space is my team had a huge falling out. One of my teams had a huge falling out. It was quite uncharacteristic. I was like, oh, everyone's really upset with everyone else. And they were trying to choose an object relational model tool for Java. And in that situation, they'd chosen two because they couldn't agree. And I'm like, well, this is not a good decision, right? And in that example, someone had said, I wanted to bring the second one in because you can performance tune it. I was like, great. Don't you only have about 100 rows of data on that table? Yes. So can you see that maybe performance tuning that wasn't really worth injecting a completely new dependency into the project that all of our developers now need to learn? Yes. I was like, okay. So, you know, in that situation, you really are preferring one problem over another. You know, you want to have something that everyone in the team knows and understands, that you have the skills to use and that doesn't set you all back acquiring new information over, yes, you could performance tune it better, but we don't actually care about that. So I was like, yeah, well, we don't care about that. We're not solving for that, right? Particularly in technology, people can get a wee bit over-oriented on, you know, the best thing. Actually, it's the best thing for the thing that matters, that's important. This is less common in large strategic decisions. You rarely have the luxury of not caring about more than one dimension. Be really careful. This is where I'm like, never build a prototype. They always go to production and you spend years' time to make them real, okay? Never build a prototype, right? Build a proof of concept and then throw it in the bin before anyone can on board to it. You be really careful, particularly if you're developing new products quickly, that somewhere on your path from ideation to build to production, you have actually planned to do all the things that need to be done to make it real in production, because it's really super hard to make a thing compliant with regulation at the end of a build, and you might actually have created an impossible situation for yourself that you could have avoided, okay? So be really clear-sighted about that. You're never, in large strategic organizations or big decisions, you usually can't only care about one thing, okay? This is one for the younger people, right? Game of Thrones. I tried to watch Game of Thrones 3 times. It took me 3 goes to get over the violence and get into it, but it's really good. As in Game of Thrones, when you're choosing a new leader, the higher up in the organization a decision needs to be made, the more people have an opinion and a stake in your decision making. Arguably, for these kinds of decisions, being right is super unimportant. Having a lot of support is incredibly important. So be really clear-sighted when you make these really super senior decisions with the CIO or your CEO or the board of your company, that how those people feel about what you're proposing is really more important necessarily than whether you absolutely think it's the right thing. Now, don't get me wrong, be candid, be honest, but be thoughtful about what's going to be successful. In Technology Strategy Patterns, he talks about if you're working on something that's not important to the senior people in your organisation, you're essentially wasting your time. It's a point well made, okay? It can be quite hard, as in Game of Thrones, I touched on this earlier, you don't want someone to feel that they lost. That can have unintended consequences. I give you Daenerys. You can't always avoid in these senior decisions, particularly where it's controversial, someone feeling that they lost out. You need to build goodwill in your career to be successful as a leader. so that you have some deposits to draw down on. Do favours, be helpful, let the small things go. Try not to burn capital you might need later. It took me 10 years to learn this, so I offer it openly to you all. I'm actually super helpful, but everyone has to suffer me having opinions about everything, and they don't love that, so I have to be intentional about making sure that I also put some credit into my relationships so that later when I piss them off, they're willing to forgive me. Okay. Pre-socialising is super important for senior level. No one wants to be surprised in Oz. They want to feel socialised, invested and consulted. Don't walk in there with your brilliant idea and surprise them with it. It won't go well. Finally, no talk is complete without the philosophy of Kung Fu Panda. Wherever you go, remember that you take yourself along, right? Develop self-awareness. Knowing yourself is the single most valuable thing you can invest time in if you want to be a good leader. I don't know standing in front of you today whether I always think I am a good leader, but I'm really trying, okay? Leaders are not born, they are made. Be thoughtful about how you learn and develop and what kind of leader you are. I am an honest, reliable, hardworking, slightly too talkative leader. That's my brand. I'm never going to be any other kind, but every day I'm trying to get better at being a leader. I'll leave you with this one thought. In the movie of your life, what kind of leader would you like to be? You get to write your own leadership story, and I hope it's one that you love. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marnie. And as I'll repeat, there'll be a chance to ask questions of any of our next three speakers at the end of them speaking, and you can either do it in Slido or stick your hand up, old school. Apropos of practically nothing, I interviewed once the man who was the animal wrangler on Game of Thrones.
Oh my God.
And he was a Northern Irish beef farmer originally, and one of his favourite jobs was creating the dragon's nest, which involved a trip to the slaughterhouse and an industrial flamethrower. This is one of the most fun things he's ever done. Anyway, next speaker, David Farker, Chief Executive Officer of IGS. And David's going to be talking not just as culture as a platform for growth. So, David.
Thank you. I'd much rather be the cheeky executive officer. That would be great. Culture as a platform, a bit of a play on software as a service. I'm going to talk to you about the business I sold in 2016. This will be at the other end of the scale from Marnie. I am not a corporate dude in any way. How many of you describe yourselves as technical? Stick your hand up. Excellent. There must have been a mix-up at the hospital. I managed to produce a marine biologist and an oceanographer. I don't have a single scientific bone in my body. So what I'm going to tell you is how I get things done by people that have talents that I simply do not, which is actually a really happy place to be, in my opinion. So what I do today for a living is I run the world's leading vertical farm company. We don't do farming. And talking about decisions, the most important decision I made in my entire 40-year career so far is to do that, not to grow food for commercial sale. So what we do is we build infrastructure for the most polluting industry on the planet to try and help it modernize itself, help it to tackle climate change and feed the world at the same time. So very exciting growing this business now across 4 continents. But let's go back to 2013 when I was approached by LDC, Lloyd's Development Capital, who tried to buy one of my other companies, Seabite, spin out from Heriot Watt. Got to know the guys, really actually quite liked them, the team from Aberdeen. And they came along and said to me, look, we can't buy Seabite, that's fair enough, but we would really like you to come and look at a thing that we have taken off AIM, which is stranded. So what I'm going to do is very quickly tell you a story. And it was the story of how we figured out we needed to build the right culture in order to save this business and the people in it who were worth saving. So we're going to go from one of these to one of these, and we built ourselves a Viking longship in order to go around and rampage against corporate competitors. There are 6 things that I want you to try to remember. You'll get these slides afterwards. The first thing is that this is a people sport. It is also a contact sport, but it's a people sport. And it is people who do absolutely everything. And there are so many things to do in a tech company. When we did our gathering last year to bring everyone together from around the world for IGS, I got an org chart and I discovered that we have to do 63 things to get a vertical farm in the hands of a farmer and get it working. Everything from accounting to legal to sales to marketing to the tech stuff and so on and so on. So the great thing about rugby is, as an analogy, you get players of all different sizes, shapes, and tendencies, and therefore that's what you need. You need to engender variety, and you need to bring in skills that you as a leader do not have. And then you have to, having picked those people, give them permission to succeed. Take the lid off them and tell them to proceed until apprehended. Allow them to make decisions, support them through that, counsel them, but it is them that you've got to empower. Do not second guess them. Most importantly, don't look in the mirror and think, wow, you're really great. We need more of you. That is absolutely the wrong thing. You need to hire people who will argue black-white with you in a reasonable way, people who have a different perspective, and therefore I think today diversity of all sorts is massively important, and you should seek it out wherever you can find it. And then finally, give people a purpose. Accelerate your business by using a purpose. In our case, we have this coming together of tackle climate change, feed the world, and everybody who comes to join IGS does so at least 50% because they want to live that purpose. Our entire data science team has left financial services and retail and stuff like that in order to come and achieve that two-part purpose. So people think it's all about metrics, they think it's all about analytics. We don't. We think it's about building a culture, and the culture we built at Workplace we have brought into IGS. We know where the value lies in the business. It lies in the people, and what you need to do is make it possible for those people to work super effectively with one another. Creating diversity in a purely Scottish company frankly has its challenges. We did some analysis with Scottish Engineering about levels of diversity of all sorts that exist within the industry. And there are real challenges with it. What we have discovered, though, is bringing people in a middle management layer with a degree of diversity and at entry level is much easier than the section in the middle. I don't know why that is, but it's just what we've discovered. So we decided there were certain qualities we wanted to build into our culture. There were things that we thought they were kind of verbs and adjectives. There were things we wanted people to do because they thought they were necessary to deliver on the journey that we knew we were going to have to make with this company. And there were certain things that then enabled. So they were really, really important. People don't go and plan in a silo. You want them to work as a team, 15 players scoring a try, and all of that sort of thing. And taking the lid off people. Proceed until apprehended, enormously important. So the team that I brought in to run Workplace after it had been taken off AIM was a team that was nothing to do with the founders of the business. You know, we were basically hired hands, and that was a different thing. I'd never done that in my life before, so that was part of the novelty. But this thing was entirely siloed. This business was completely broken. Sales hated marketing. Engineering hated support, and I'm using the word hated. Every time marketing generated a lead, sales would screw it up and throw it in the bin. That's how much they hated each other. And there was huge suspicion everywhere about what everybody else was up to. As a result of that, economically, we were in a significant amount of trouble. We were hemorrhaging cash. The business was stuck at about 9 million of revenue, and it was losing 1 million on the bottom line. And it was not the SaaS company that LDC thought they had bought. We discovered 17 product lines hidden in little cupboards, the most novel of which was software for blending tea. The only interesting thing that came out of that was I learned that you can change the recipe of blended tea by up to 40%, and the consumer will not notice. There you go. There's a take-home for you. So, who was causing this? Was it the humans at ground level? One or two of them, but actually it was the management. They were spectacularly bad. So what we did was, after a month, we fired them all. Now, I'd come in as exec chair, and I said to the LDC guys, listen, we're going to have to go and hire a CEO here. And they went, nah, we're not doing that. You can do that job, and one of us will be the chair. Okay, so we agreed to do that. And then we started working seriously on this business. And it became really obvious to me that we had to turn it into a startup. So this was like a sort of pressing the time machine button and going retro back about 25 years. I walked in to the engineering room on my first day. The majority of them were wearing jackets, and about half of them were wearing ties. And I just went, oh God, what am I going to do with this? So I thought, I've got it. Just before I went to jump on my plane to come back to Scotland, it was based in Milton Keynes, lovely spot. I went back into the engineering room and I said, okay, I'll be back on Tuesday. Anybody who comes in wearing jeans and a t-shirt will be promoted on the spot. Thank you, have a great weekend. So I came back, I got the LDC guy who'd come in as chairman, and I said, Ken, go and put on, I need you in t-shirt and jeans and trainers, right? So we both rocked up like that, went into the engineering room. Guess what? They were wearing jackets and ties. And you could see some of them verbally going, oh, shit. So we needed to create something that was hungry, something that had attitude, and something that had ambition. And you can't do that. I'm sorry for those of you wearing jackets, but you can't do that wearing a jacket. I needed a hero. And just before that, I'd been to Skye to see a bizarre little thing called the Giant McCaskill, this sort of 8-foot-high guy who, there was a model of him in a croft, and one of his descendants, was showing us around this bizarre little exhibition. And at the end he said, have you ever heard of my son? Who's your son? Danny McCaskill. No. Oh, watch this video. And he gave me a card with a link to a Danny McCaskill video. Who's seen Danny McCaskill? Utterly staggering. So what we did was we showed them a video of Danny McCaskill. What does he do? He does audacious things. He usually falls off the first time. What does he do? He gets back on his bike and he tries again. And he is massively ambitious and super humble. So Danny became our official hero. And if you haven't watched this one where he rides the Coolin, it's fairly staggering. So we kind of made some decisions, to Marnie's point, as to things that we felt that we really sort of needed to do. And once we did some analysis on the business and we said, right, enough, we now know what's broken, we're going to fix it, it really delivered some significant kind of shocks. So we called the team the Crew. We started doing boat analogies everywhere. We put bells up in every office, and every time we made a sale, we rang the bell and so on, and we just got people to participate. And we asked them to come on board. Now, there were some people who really obviously were going to stand on the quayside and watch us sail into the sunset. And you know what? That was absolutely the right thing for them to do. Not all of them realized that. We had to point it out to some of them. But, you know, we had those very difficult conversations. There was then another lot who sort of got on board but put their hands in their pockets and sat down and didn't really try that hard. Actually, I just think they couldn't be bothered or were too scared to go and find another job. So the people who stayed, we gave them a paddle. We actually gave them paddles. And we said, you are going to have to row like hell. I know it's completely the wrong kind of paddle for a Viking longship, but don't be picky. So you're going to have to paddle like hell. And if you do, we might stand a snowball's chance in hell. So we got rid of 1/3 of the entire workforce. We went from 135 people to 45 people in the space of about 3 months. That was painful, but absolutely necessary. And almost immediately, because people know each other, they've worked together, they see the ones that are idle. The ones that remained suddenly started to get really super productive. So in the first 100 days, and it's always good to have something like a 100-day plan, we took this £1 million loss and we deleted it. So we stopped doing things, we started changing things, so we improved our profitability by £10,000 a day for 100 days. And none of it was difficult decisions to take. You're not going to Russia anymore because you don't make any sales and you've got a girlfriend there, haven't you? Right, you're fired. So all that kind of really technical stuff. We became profitable, we became cash generative. And we, the LDC had put, I think, 5 million aside for us. We didn't need to touch a penny for it. And now we were in shape for growth. So what we had to do, just like we've done with IGS, we will never grow crop for commercial sale, we make infrastructure. We had to do the same thing here. So what Workplace did was a bit of HR software. It was employee scheduling software. And we found this diagram of the HR software world. We noticed that we were in the top right-hand quadrant under a definition workforce management. And look what we found. A great big open space. That space is when you are able to schedule employees in a way that equally satisfy the needs of the business and the unit manager and the employee themselves. And a place where we discovered that that was a massive issue was in retail. Now, you would think having 4 people in a small shop is an easy thing to schedule. It is not. The algorithms are really complicated. Every retailer has a slightly different sales model. They have different patterns of work, and they hire people who may be single mums who cannot come to work before 9:30 in the morning because they got to drop little Johnny off at school, and. So it turned out that it was really problematic, and we managed to win business like Walmart, Rite Aid, T-Mobile, H&M, I mean DKNY, serious retail players from around the world. And the company we beat the most often was the big oil tanker called Kronos. So we found a place for ourselves in the world. And it was really obvious to us that if we were going to get this crew seriously galvanized and working like a team, we had to focus on building, first of all, trust. And you cannot trust each other unless you are honest. And in order to be honest, you have to be open. And to be bothered being open, you have to have a sense of mutual respect for other people. And you have to be willing to have mutual reliance. I don't care that Duan van der Merwe scored that phenomenal try at Twickenham. Yes, I was there. The platform, look at what happened on the pitch. They opened the English apart. And there was a huge pass. And then he could make his run. He did not do that on his own. Never, ever make that mistake. Everything is teamwork. And that allowed us to be very frank, to talk openly, and we sort of created this culture of confessional. Oh, sorry, I dropped the ball. Fine, don't drop it again, but let's pick it up and figure out why you dropped the ball, and we'll fix that. We then needed to have a real sense of purpose as to where we were going. So we wrote this press release. We imagined what we would be like, what was our value proposition, and so on, in about 5 years' time. And that gave us something that everyone could look at and point at. We were very clear also that what mattered more to us than being at work was having great family and home life. And we deliberately set out to encourage people to put that first, and that made them more productive. So now we needed some sort of way of expressing our organization. But I really did not want one of those top-down tree things, right? I hate them. The one we have actually at IGS is the other way up, and I'm at the bottom of the trunk. And it's great, because then all the real work gets done by the leaves, you know? And that's a great way to express it. And the roots, by the way, are our investors. So we have this tree diagram. This one we created was nicknamed the fuzzy eggs. So we had people who made delighted customers. We had people who made great products. We had people who made those other two possible, and people who made the whole thing hang together. They were overlapping because they had to collaborate with each other. They were fuzzy on the edge because we wanted permeability. We wanted really interesting ideas from engineering to go into other parts of the business. And we ended up with sort of product management-like charts on the walls in accounting. It was absolutely brilliant the way they started coaching and supporting each other, and everybody, like legal, started talking about doing sprints. You know, it was really, really encouraging. So that's why they were called the fuzzy eggs, and we've used it again at IGS. We then needed a way to express our strategy. So there were 6 ways to figure out who was a good customer. What channel do they buy in? How big are they? What do they actually need? Where are they? Do they have a cultural fit with what our software can do? And what sector are they in? So this 6-legged spider, I know spiders have got 8 legs, but this 6-legged spider was the way that we would express and test whether each one of our opportunities would work. But then we needed a plan internally and operationally to get better and better. So a mate of mine showed me this thing called the T-map. So what you've got here is in the bottom corner, you've got today, and up there, you've got in 3 years' time, and our vision for the business. And like rays of the sun, you've got the different functions. So engineering, sales, marketing, etc., etc. What each team got to do was say what they were good at on a sticky, and that was a green one, and what they felt they should improve on, and that was a red one. And that's fine, that's a bit of confessional. Then everyone else is allowed to change them, which is great fun. So everyone else gets to give their opinion. And in the end, you argue it, and you agree, actually, that is the truth. And then you go 1 quarter, 2 quarters, half a year, year 2, year 3 out. What are we going to either improve, stop, or introduce for the first time? And you've got 3 different colors. And what that then gives you here is an agenda for change. It's called a T-map or a transformation map. And then you can look for patterns in the things you say you're going to do, or stop, or fix, and then you can build, and in the case of this one, we had a 5-step plan. And this plan was supposed to take 3 years to implement. We actually ended up doing it in 18 months. And this agenda gave our little ship, the Good Ship Workplace, a voyage. Everything felt like we were really, really going somewhere. And then we created our employee engagement group, and they decided on the values and the expression of those values that they wanted to live. We never put these on mouse mats. Yes, we had mouse mats. We never put them on mugs or posters. If you have to write this stuff down other than in a place of induction on the web, you have failed. People need to live the values, and they will only live values they have helped to create and values in which they really firmly believe. So giving the crew ownership of that and leadership of that was enormously important. And then we started putting ourselves through other tests. So I discovered Glassdoor. I'd never heard of it before 2014. It was our Americans who said we should be using Glassdoor for recruitment. By October 15, we were in the top 10 tech companies. And when we sold the business in 2016, we were officially the 3rd best tech company with a score of 4.9 to work for, and the other 2 that were above us were also 4.9s. And you can still see that site. No one's touched it since September 16, but it's still up there. I think it's degraded to about 4.6 again now because it degrades over time if you don't get any more reviews. What this enabled us to do, though, was enormously important. It allowed us to behave like this 30-year-old startup, and there were brilliant things that people decided they were going to do. I've covered that point. So how do you know? How do you know if you've succeeded with this culture as a platform? Basically, the crew takes over. They run it, they manage it, they own it. IGS is growing. We've gone from 25 people to 250 since COVID started. And somebody asked me, how are we going to maintain the culture? I said, I'm not doing it. You've got to do it. You've got to live it, breathe it, and want to do it. And that's what will maintain the culture. So customer delight was our #1 business goal, and we knocked it out of the park. And these are the results that we got in terms of our growth as a business, in terms of our profitability, which is not always a welcome word in SaaS, and then in terms of the sustainability of the business that we were winning. And in terms of people, we had a less than 2% churn rate, which is exactly what we've got now at IGS. And then we were able to sell it. Thank you very much.
Third and final speaker today is Tim Sabinoff, CTO of... For some reason, I'm really struggling with people's jobs titles today. My apologies. Chief Technical Officer for Zumo, looking at sustainability in the crypto sector. So, Tim.
Hi, everyone. So I'll start with something that I usually hate if I'm on the other side of the fence. I'll ask you 3 questions. If the answer is yes, raise your hand or give me a big nod. That'll do as well. How many of you use internet on a daily basis? How many of you have been on a plane before? How many of you own or know someone who owns crypto? All right, I got some hands through all 3 questions, which is a good sign for the rest of presentation. Let's do a quick recap of evolution of aviation. It's a very weird start, but it will make sense very soon. 1000 BCE, kites are invented in China. 1500s, Leonardo da Vinci sketches his amazing flying machines. 903, Wright brothers perform first powered flight. 1961, Yuri Gagarin becomes first human in space. And then later in 69, Neil Armstrong walks on the moon. There was a period of 400 years between Da Vinci and Wright brothers. But then it only took us 66 years to get to the moon. Let's do another one. We are slowly getting on actual topic. Evolution of internet. I will spare you the details of very kind of technical mumbo-jumbo that happened first 15 years. But in 1991, World Wide Web standard is introduced. By 93, we reach 600 web pages in existence. 98, Google is born. 2004, Facebook goes online, shortly followed by YouTube and Twitter. And in December 2022, 5.3 billion people use internet. That is 66% of human population. Let's do another one, last one, evolution of Bitcoin. 2008, individual or a group under pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto publishes Bitcoin white paper. In 2010, Florida resident buys 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoins, officially kickstarting a tradition that is still celebrated today, Bitcoin Pizza Day. 2011, volume of transactions pushed through network on daily basis reaches an average of 1,000. 2021, Bitcoin price reaches all-time high of just a smidge over $66,000. And in 2023, last month, daily average of transactions being pushed through network reaches 300,000. In 12 years, the Bitcoin went from 1,000 transactions per day to 300,000 transactions. That is 3,000% increase. What do all these stories have in common? Deloitte did a study of how much time is needed for technology to be adopted by first 50 million people. And what they have figured out is exactly what our examples showcased. Adoption is increasing. Adoption is getting faster. Telephone took 75 years, radio 38, television 14, and social media only 2. The rate of technology, the pace of technology adoption is increasing drastically. But what does that mean? Are we prepared for it? Do we know how it will affect us, how it affects environment, how it affects society? Multiple studies have shown the negative effects that social media can have on individuals' mental health. The advancements on hardware side allow us to produce more and more, sadly, allow us to produce more and more e-waste every year. Our virtual identity is increasing, and with that, our carbon footprint is getting bigger every year. It is predicted that by 2040, the technological sector will be responsible for 14% of all total global emissions. By 2019, 53.6 million tons of e-waste has been produced. And latest studies show that 1 hour of video conferencing can produce up to 1 kilogram of CO2. Besides obviously being very much into aviation and technology, I am also CTO at Zumo, where we have created a digital asset as a service platform that helps bank and fintechs embed digital asset solutions into their existing offering. We engineer those solutions with focus on trust and sustainability. We have embedded our core values in everyday business, and those values underpin our sustainability strategy. We believe we have a solution. We know what we are working towards. And everything started when the company was actually founded. We got together, the core team of 7 people got together and spent a day in the office brainstorming. What are our personal values? What is the intersection? What are the non-negotiables for business? These values didn't come from founders. They didn't come from leadership team. They came from people. And we have prepared a list of values. That was 3-4 years ago, a list of values that still sticks today. And those values are still valid today because they actually guide us. They guide us in everything we do. We celebrate them. On a quarterly basis, we get together and we have values awards to individuals who were nominated by their co-workers are recognized for living the values. The values became part of our DNA. We have grouped values in 4 categories: inclusion inspires, transparency wins, unshakable commitment, and love the adventure. One value is particularly important for today's presentation, the value that belongs into inclusion inspires. We seek to ensure our decisions and actions benefit people and the planet. But before moving on, let's do a quick recap of what our journey so far has been. Business was founded in 2018. We spent next 2 years developing the tech. We launched our consumer app, appropriately named Zumo app, in 2020. By 2021, we had more than 60,000 registered users, and we were FCA crypto regulated, a big stamp of approval. Next 2 years, we're focused on building and improving our technology. We started tackling our decarbonization solution, which I'll talk a bit more in a minute. And by the end of 2020, we launched our B2B offering, Zumo Enterprise. We knew that in order to live our values, in order to deliver what we set ourselves out to deliver, we cannot work in silo. Especially on the sustainability front, we need to reach out. That is why we became one of the first signees of Crypto Climate Accord in UK. We worked with World Economic Forum, with Cambridge University for Alternative Finance. We talked and collaborated with experts and sustainability experts from different projects. And why is sustainability so important for us? Crypto, blockchain, is a pretty new industry. It's a pretty new technology. It's hard to develop anything on it. But what's even harder is to ensure that what you're doing is actually right. Remember, one of the core values we had is making sure that our actions and decisions benefit people and the planet. I'm sure you heard or saw in media the scrutiny that Bitcoin received when it comes to its effect on sustainability, its effect on environment. It's true. 2 camps were formed. One camp essentially said that Bitcoin is pure evil. It will solely melt all the ice caps, and this is the end. The other camp adopted more defensive strategy, saying, well, sure, it's bad, but look at other industries. Look at mining, look at gold industry, look at traditional banking. In reality, truth is, as always, somewhere in between. But we wanted to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. We couldn't just bury our heads in sand. We needed to understand what the problem actually is. How big is it? Because only when we understand it can we start working on it. That is why 2 years of our existence were spent on researching, getting to the bottom of the actual problem, understanding the technology, understanding the environmental aspect that cryptocurrencies and, more importantly, Bitcoin has. We formed an internal work group within Zumo, a group that was composed of people from all different departments: marketing, UX, product, engineering, finance, data. We got a team of brightest working on this challenge, learning, reading, collaborating. We did everything in a very transparent manner as well. We wanted to do it in a transparent manner because we knew that the only way to move forward is to get industry, to get the wider professional industry that works within crypto on our side. Not necessarily saying we are right, but criticizing us as well. We organized round tables. We published 2 papers. They're still available on our website, I believe under sustainability section. But we welcomed the criticism. And why? Well, because we needed to know, is what we are doing, is it actually right? And all that theory was at the end translated into physical product. We did a pilot titled Zero Hero. For a couple of months, we compensated all the Bitcoin purchased through our Zumo app by acquiring renewable energy certificates for it. We used our own formula, our own calculations, our own technology that we have developed to do that. In total, we compensated for over 1.5 million pounds worth of Bitcoin. That is equal to 850 megawatt hours. We interviewed our users. 84% of them recognized the problem and said that industry needs to work on it. But more importantly, besides obviously getting good feedback from our user base, was that it inspired our employees. Everyone that worked on the project was inspired. They saw the impact they made. They saw the impact they can make. And that allowed us to dream big. It wasn't just making Zumo sustainable anymore. It was figuring out how we can use this technology, how we can use our knowledge to make the wider industry sustainable. How can we decarbonize the wider industry? And that's exactly what we did. We started working on a solution that we have launched a couple of months ago on our enterprise side, a solution that enterprises can use to decarbonize their holdings, a solution that we hope later down the line will help decarbonize the wider technology sector. There is no cookie-cutter recipe of how we got here or what my advice would be. But I do have a couple of points, and I'm very glad to see that it aligns very well with what David was also saying when it comes to values on what our approach actually was. You need to define a very clear mission and purpose. You need to rally the troops. Everyone needs to understand what the purpose of your organization is, and it needs to go beyond just the profits. People need to feel inspired. They need to feel like they have impact. You need to design your organization in a way where every individual actually matters. You need to encourage diversity and inclusion. Our team is incredibly diverse, coming from different backgrounds, possessing different knowledges, different skills, coming from different countries, speaking different languages. We have different perspectives when everyone comes to the table. Our debates get incredibly heated, and that's good. I like to be challenged. Being challenged is good. Healthy debate is needed because it allows us to design and launch products that are more inclusive for everyone. Engage with experts, engage with regulators. Don't bury your head in sand. If there is a problem, you need to acknowledge it. Even if it's big, you need to start somewhere. On the long term, sustainability can become part of your USP. It can become something that allows you to attract better talent. It can become something that becomes part of your core values. It can make you better than your competition. And start somewhere. Integrate sustainability in your everyday practices. Maybe there's a way where you can reduce electricity in your office a bit. Maybe you can offer your employees more sustainable ways of commuting. Maybe you can reduce waste. Do something, but make sure it's not just a poster that you stick on the wall in the kitchen. Make sure you talk about it. Make sure that you show them the progress. I do believe that inherently everyone is good, and once you do good, you just need to give them tools, and you'll be surprised what happens in a very short time. Analyzing past is simple. Predicting the future is impossible. That's why whenever I get too confident about knowing what will happen next, what industry standards actually are showing that industry is doing, I go and I look at illustrations, a set of illustrations prepared by French artists in 1900s. The illustrations showcase France in 2000. So what will the development be in 100 years? And I have a couple of them with me here. Obviously, everything is in the air. Your post might still be late, but at least postman will come on a very cool glider. Because everyone is flying, so does police, and this actually looks pretty scary. And my favorite, who doesn't want to commute on a well bus? We don't know where the future is going, but it's on us to make sure that we get there in a sustainable way. Creating technology isn't just about writing code in your basement anymore. Technologies go viral, and it's part of our responsibility to make sure that innovations we are pushing out, that innovations we are creating, are also creating a more sustainable and inclusive future. Building that inclusivity, building a culture of sustainability inside our tech companies is a core part of that responsibility. You need to start working on it sooner or later, and it would be better if everyone, with us including, starts sooner. I'll leave you with a quote from Nigel Topping. In this race, we all win or we all lose. And hopefully this talk got you thinking, and you'll join us, so we can build a better future together. Thank you.
Right, let's have a chance to ask any questions now. You can either stick your hand up, we've got a couple of live mics in the room, or you can use Slido, if that's your preference. There are a couple of questions through on Slido already, actually. I pull up. Has anybody got a question from the floor for a start? Okay, and we'll go from this then. From Sharon Wallace, this refers to something that I think you said, Marnie. Can pessimism and decision-making coexist with a culture of innovation?
Yeah, so one of the most depressing moments of my career was when I read a quote that said that the most dangerous project managers or product managers are people that had a really, really great idea, right? Meaning that if you have an idea but you don't have a business hypothesis for value, you can burn a lot of an organization's energy doing a thing that has no actual value. And I was like, oh my God, I am that person, right? I'm really energetic, I'm super efficient, I get things done. I have no idea if this is actually useful, because that's been an evolution in technology product, is understanding how you're going to measure your success. I actually think pessimism and decision making is the same thing as saying that every team needs someone who wants to be a pain in your backside. You need a disruptor, you need someone who's going to challenge you. And actually the best kinds of innovations are the ones that have survived good challenge. Now, you need to curate an environment where people are encouraged to have blue sky ideas, right? That you encourage and you invest and you make time for that. But you very quickly, if you want to actually innovate, need to be able to test those ideas to figure out which ones you should double down on, which ones you should say, like the flying policeman or the whale bus. It's a lovely idea, but maybe we won't do that this sprint, okay? So yeah, I absolutely think that's really important. And if I'm honest, I think maybe that's what senior leaders do in organisations, is figure out which of your brilliant ideas are the ones that you should double down on. So.
I must confess, I wasn't sure if pessimism was the word I would have used. And I'd be interested in getting your thoughts on this, David, because I am probably the pain in the arse professional in the BBC, because I've been doing it a long time. So anytime we go and do something, I'm the one that says, yeah, but what if that happens? What if that happens? What if that, what's our plan A? What's our plan B? What's our plan C? And that doesn't make you pessimistic necessarily.
Not necessarily, but I think that your pessimism doesn't have to exist in terms of the potential for you to fail. You could be pessimistic that if we don't do this, then either we won't stop that bad thing happening, or this thing over here might not happen. So you could be pessimistic in a way that is actually motivational. Mm-hmm. And you can...
Motivational pessimism.
Yes.
You have it here first.
Hashtag.
And so I did hear a really interesting talk the other day, and it was called Accelerating with Purpose. And it's a guy who has done a lot of work with the third sector, and he gave, for example, the RNLI their new tagline, which is to save everyone. Now, they know they can't, but they ran a series of ads, and guys and gals dressed up in their gear for the lifeboat. And they've got quotes like, "We saved 5 people yesterday, but we lost 2. Mm-hmm. And that really inspires people. And is that pessimistic? I don't know. Can you run a business rather than a charity on the basis of an impossible mission? Maybe you should. Feed the world, tackle climate change. I always caveat both of those by saying we're not going to do that on our own, but we can sure as hell help. Mm-hmm. So I think there's room for all of these things. I think whether it's quite pessimism, all these views, back to diversity, all these different views, all these different approaches, all have a role to play. So my answer to your question is yes, it can coexist.
Tim, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think it comes down to risk management and risk taking. What's your kind of perceived way of managing risk? And failing is, well, acceptable. It needs to be acceptable as long as you learn from it. And here I wouldn't necessarily say pessimism, but definitely certain level of skepticism with every decision is healthy, and it can coexist, and it can give birth to a good culture, as long as you understand what it actually entails.
One other quick comment. We have, just listening to Tim and thinking about that, I did a thing at a data science festival. I had no right to be there, but they had asked me to do a talk, and I wanted a catch line for it beforehand. And so what I ended up with was, if you cut IGS through the middle, our DNA is a double helix of crop science and data science. Now, that is really a build, measure, learn world. It's a world in which you say, I need to grow cherry tomatoes that will have this level of vitamin C in them, and we're going to run an experiment to see if that happens. Now, being pessimistic that it might not be right is perfectly okay. So there is a place for being wrong, because it allows you to iterate and then change it and do it better. So, yeah.
I mean, as you probably know, I've seen your vertical farming unit just outside Dundee, and it's outstanding. I mean, it's really, really clever, tremendously productive. I mean, just everything. All the really good systems in the world are circular, and it's exactly what this does. It all joins up. They thought about it in great depth. It's maybe not perfect, but I'm not clever enough to spot the imperfections. But it was damned impressive.
Thank you.
Just that last, the point there for a question from Anonymous. And I'm going to put this to you, Tim. How do you build a culture which is open to failure while still delivering value for your business without creating a division within an organisation? I could see that being a real problem. That you've got a bunch of people who, yeah, we're wacky and we'll fail, and, and eventually the rest of them are saying, yeah, we're trying to hold this together.
Yeah. Well, it's not easy, I guess. The starting point is the culture. Everybody needs to know what everyone is doing. I think things become incredibly difficult to manage when people start working in silos, because then you get to a point where finger pointing becomes incredibly easy. Marketing saying, why isn't product delivering what they should be delivering? Mm-hmm. Why have they failed to launch the latest version on the proposed date? I think as long as everyone knows what everyone is up to, and we are all working towards the same goal, and we nurture that culture of, you failed, fine. We failed, fine. But what have we learned from it? So in our case, when it comes to product development, any incident, and we call incident, I don't know, failed production deploy, for example, is accompanied with retrospective. If incident is bigger, it's retrospective that external team members are also invited. Everyone in the business can join, and we go through what has failed and what we have learned from it, and what measures were put in place to make sure this doesn't happen anymore. Incidents, failures can be good if you learn from them.
How, just out of curiosity, Marnie, how if you were all working with a team of people, how many successive failures, failure 1, failure 2, failure 3, failure 4, would you tolerate, for lack of a better term, before you started saying, you know what?
So,
there's a pattern here.
Yeah. That's a really interesting question. I don't have a quick answer for it. I will say this, I always encourage people to fail differently, right? Like,
find a new way to fail.
Find a new way to fail, right? Like, so interestingly, you particularly when you're doing hard things, people can fail a lot before they succeed, and that's kind of all right. Particularly if you're doing something completely new, right? Like, it's gonna. There's no. I don't know that you can even plan for when you're going to be successful, and so I think that the hardest problems involve a lot of failure, but there has to be some degree of progress and learning. I think that's the really important part. So, and I think understanding, really importantly, when do people know that they're going to fail? Like, so for example, I can totally cope with a team deciding to fail on a plan that was 6 sprints long or 8 sprints long and say, well, actually, we need to pivot on this. We made the wrong decision. The design wasn't quite right. And when we started to build it, we realized that, like, that's acceptable failure. What I really struggle with is that it's the day before delivery day and we've gone from green to red. Like, that's the stuff that in organisations is hard to survive because people don't trust you then. So I think it depends is honestly the answer, and I think that hard problems involve quite a lot of failure and that there's tolerance for that as long as people can see progress in the right direction and learning from it.
I spoke to a man years ago who'd been a project manager, quite a senior project manager for BP, and they had, I can't remember, it was some gadget they'd been developing, and literally it was 001. That was what the tag number was on the side of this particular bit of kit, whatever it was. And the economics changed a week before it was due to be rolled out, and they basically just shelved it. Now, at that stage, they'd spent over £240 million on it. And I said, how did that feel? He says, well, hell of a sight better than if it had been 480 million quid, or any multiple thereafter. So sometimes the sensible thing to do is to pull the plug and say, no, this makes no sense just now. It might be useful in the future.
I think that probably, and Tim probably knows a lot more about this than I do, I don't know what the percentage is. The percentage of great ideas that never make it into reality is probably really quite high. I used to have a colleague who every project he'd ever worked on had been shelved. We used to joke it was definitely him that was the common factor, right? Like, don't let him touch your thing, right? So I think that is part of doing business. It's probably about how you feel.
Yeah, I suppose. Any questions on the floor? Gentleman there, I'll come to you in a moment. Right. So the microphone's just behind you, sir. You're down, the other side of you.
It's behind you.
You couldn't have done that better if you tried.
Apologies. My name is Andre. I just want to know, let's go a bit wider than our community, our families, our society is currently going through a lot of change, a lot of pessimism is probably what I would put it under. How do you think this is influencing what we do as tech leaders inside our companies? Is it something that we just need to deal with, or is it something we need to plan for?
Okay, I'm going to paraphrase that to a certain extent, David. There's a lot of bad things happening at the moment. is that influencing what businesses are actually doing? Is it influencing decision-making? Is it influencing the implementation of ideas?
So if you were to get 3 of the members of our employee engagement group up here, or maybe our ED&I group up here, they would tell you that what they're seeing in the world provides them with a context, and it provides them with a context that they want to, I think, improve on. So a bit like pessimism, you know, if there is a place for it, but what you have to do is get beyond it. You know, I feel incredibly sorry. My kids are 21 and 25, and I would not want to be dating right now in the era of social media, and we talk about that a lot. So I do think that there are some real negative influences, and some of them created by the tech sector, unbridled, that are out there. But if you choose to react to that, if you choose to turn those things on their head, I remember after we sold Workplace, I retired, okay? Literally retired, and I was retired for about 15 months before my wife got through breast cancer, and I was able to look after her. And she turned around to me and said, I'm going back to Chas, Children's Hospice, where she's a volunteer for 10 years. And what are you going to do? And I just looked at her and said, I'm really good at being retired. And then the next week, the founder of IGS's son phoned me and said, do you want to come and see my dad's R&D project? No. Why would I do that? But it was in Invergowrie, and I could get on the train in Dunblane and go Glen Eagles in Perth. I had a lovely train ride, went to see it. It blew me away. And I remember saying to my best pal, there is no way I would have come out of retirement other than to solve or help to solve something huge that is bad and evil. So I think what you do is you take the context, you don't deny what you're saying, you take that as a context and you make yourself determined to do something about it.
Okay, thank you very much for that, David. There's a question down at the front here. If I can get the microphone here, please.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Tandy Nicole, and I enjoyed all your talks. I've just got a quick question to ask, because today there's been a lot of talk around culture and creating room for experiments. And I think because today we are all leaders here, there are some things that's happening in organizations. So things like toxic culture, blame culture. What advice would you give to any leader right now to combat that challenge? Because sometimes it means that you might need to unlearn what's happening right now or change your processes and practices.
Okay. Who wants to pick that up for a start?
All organizations are a reflection of their leadership, and it is the job of leaders to create an environment in which toxic, etc., is completely unacceptable. But after that, having lit the blue touch paper, you retire and you encourage, with a bit of nutrient, the people, as I said, to create the culture. So get rid of anything like that that's a blocker, lead by example every single day, and create a place, a petri dish, where you can let the fungi grow. And it will.
I'm not thinking of anyone in particular here, but what if it's not bullying, it's actually just having really high standards?
I'm not able to have really high standards. I can't do anything. All I can do, I discovered the only thing in the world I can do is tell stories. And so if you tell stories, you can tell stories about the future as well as stories about the past. And if you do that, you will create an environment in which people choose to come and flourish.
Marn, have you anything to add by way of an answer?
Yeah, so I don't know how many of you are very familiar with Jamie Dimon. He's quite a colourful character. He leads a culture for inclusion at our organisation, which is a big part of the reason I work at JP Morgan. He's really remarkable on that front. The one thing I would say is, and we do this a lot, it's really important to write down what matters to you. What is your set of unchallengeable requirements for everyone that works in your organisation? What are the set of things that you hold to be a measure by which everyone shall be measured and held accountable? I think that is enormously useful. And we have, I think, 48 different nationalities. I'm obviously at the old end of the spectrum. We have a huge range of generations in our office, and there's a lot of people. and it helps us all to be grounded, what's expected of us all as colleagues, and then we hold each other accountable for that. And I think oftentimes when we have cultural challenges, it's as much about us failing to communicate well what we expect as anything else, and I think that makes a huge difference.
As a question there, Tim, for all the emphasis on ethics and culture and tech leadership, why does it always seem that tech has a negative impact on the world around us? How would you respond to that?
For Tim, isn't it?
because it makes a lot better news,
Yeah.
would be my guess. But in reality, all tech can be used for good or for bad, and we had some very sad events in human history where tech for good was ultimately used for terrible things. Yeah. So I think it's our responsibility to, well, try and guide tech in the right direction, but the reality is that, yeah, news like to sell bad stories. That's why Bitcoin is going to be the end for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Again, coming back to something you said, Marnie, that you were talking about having a dozen problems to solve. In my experience, people pick their favourite problem. They have types of problems that they think, well, that was, I have no idea how to go about solving that one, so we'll ignore that. But the trouble is, their favourite problem might not be the most pressing one.
So interestingly, I think in a little bit about the know yourself piece, like there's definitely problems I'm most drawn to because I'm super comfortable with them. And I think this is where you need to be really clear about what are the goals that you're trying to serve and how does how you spend your time align to that. And that implies culturally as well. Like if you prioritize delivery over culture, that always ends badly, right? And that people kind of do that, want to cut some corners because we're in a hurry and doing thing X. And I think you need to be really clear-sighted about you kind of get the outcomes you deserve. So yeah, I think that's a pitfall we'll have to try and avoid.
Any last question from the floor? Just the lady at the front here, please.
Hello, my name's Una Van Dawson. I was just wondering, you talk a lot about learning from failures within organisations. What about without? What about FTX? I mean, are you guys running around trying to buy software that was good in that company? And how do you, as a industry, work with failures?
So when I first came to see IGS and see the vertical farm at Invergowrie, I knew absolutely nothing. I didn't even know agri-tech was a word. To me, a vertical farm was sheep on a hillside near where I live. Actually, the oldest one in the world, I've now decided, is Machu Picchu. But so I was getting myself into something I knew almost nothing about. And when I did my homework, I discovered this thing that a lot of people were trying to build their own. They were having to raise, in one case, over $1 billion, and they have no revenue. And so you've got businesses that are not farmers and not tech companies. The question I now ask on stage is, can you name me the last farmer that built his own combine harvester? So these companies have the wrong business model and they're failing. And we chose to learn from that. So, and say, we are not going to do that. We will not grow crop for commercial sale. So absolutely you can learn from outside.
Tim?
I think the FTX crypto as a space is a very good example of how very young industry that regulation isn't able to keep up with fails in a very spectacular and big way. Certain companies fail in a very spectacular and big way. I think what we are seeing, again, in crypto space right now is effectively bad companies that succeeded just because they were there first, now being weeded out. It's a very normal process. The whole sector is becoming a lot more mature. And how we deal with it is, well, any partner, any vendor, any company we want to work with, we need to understand how everything works under the hood. And we were on meetings with, well, I shouldn't talk about names, but we were on meetings where they simply said, well, money goes in, and at the end of the month, you get interest out. Okay, how do you do it? Well, it's a black box. Scary. So those are the decisions that you as a business need to make. What is your risk appetite? Are you okay with having partners that just do something under the hood? Or do you go the route that we went and you source partners that are trustable, are incredibly transparent, are regulated, and you can actually work and grow with?
Okay, and finally, Marnie.
I'm not going to talk too much to the detail because I'm a technologist, not a banker, but I think Silicon Valley Bank was a huge learning opportunity for a lot of the big banks and the European bank disruption that happened after that. So I think certainly in sort of fintech, there's a lot of learning from other people's mistakes, and there's been quite a lot of that lately. I think that's probably quite a wake-up call, actually, for venture capital and for the industry and for, I guess, how we think about risk in technology. So many hours of technology capital was spent learning from SVB. So I think we do a lot of that, and actually we talk about it a lot as well. So it's quite an open topic. In regulated industry, you obviously get to see the regulator's view of failure, and we learn a lot from that, and that's often an important driver for change in our business.
Okay. Can I just ask you to thank our three speakers again, Marnie, David, and Tim, please. Right, thank you. Well, I found it a very interesting day. I hope you agree. I'd just like to say thank you to all the speakers and to our conference partners, exhibitors, and sponsors. On a minor point, a lot of you got badges around your necks. We will recycle those if you stick them off at the Digit registration desk. You can take them home if you want. I've got a big bowl of them at home, but it's completely pointless. There is a conference survey which is not completely pointless because it gives Digit feedback. They don't just want pats on the back. If there's anything you think could be improved, then please let them know. They can't guarantee to act on it, but if they don't know what your suggestion is, they certainly won't be able to act on it. It'll be sent to you by email, post-event. You can get involved too. If you fancy actually doing one of the presentations, or if you're sitting next to someone who would make an excellent presenter, dob them in. Just let us know, and we'll come chasing after them. Just to repeat what Ray said this morning, our next two events are Digit North, the Innovation Summit. That's on the 25th of May at the P&J Centre Live in Aberdeen, which is a huge barn of a place. You get lost in it. Cloud First Summit, 15th of June, here in Dynamic Earth. There is a drinks reception upstairs at the moment, so another chance to actually talk to some of the exhibitors. But for myself, Mark Stephen, thank you for your time and your attention and your patience. Safe journey home. Thank you.